Jason said that there was no plan necessarily to go for a 2 or 3 during that. When do you make a decision that I'm going to go for the step back? Was it when you got the switch on Rudy? Was it just all instinct?
I don't really know. I can't answer that. I just saw some space, decided to shoot a 3. Get to my spot, step back. That's it. But I just decided, I saw some space.
Luka Doncic steals game 2 for the Mavericks as they go up 2-0 on the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it's Deja Luka all over again for Rudy Gobert. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Postgame host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks taking a 2-0 series lead over the Minnesota Timberwolves. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Luka Doncic's game winner with 3 seconds left delivers the Mavericks a dramatic 18-point comeback win as they take game 2, 109-108 to lead Minnesota 2-0 with the series moving to Dallas beginning on Sunday in their best of 7 in the Western Conference Finals, as the Mavericks are now halfway home to the NBA Finals after they use a terrific fourth quarter from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving to be able to get the win. They got some massive help from their 2 centers in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, who combined for 30 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks, as the Mavericks find a way yet again to get a road win as they now move to 6-2 on the road in the postseason, have now won 4 straight games on the road, and now find themselves with a massive 2-0 series lead against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and brimming with confidence as this resilient group continues to find different ways to win games. And they did so, taking out a desperate Minnesota Timberwolves team who was trying to avoid an 0-2 hole, but were unable to do so thanks to the heroics of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, which we will detail throughout the course of our show. But for the Mavericks to get this win after beating Minnesota in game number 1 and then withstanding what was the barrage of 3-pointers from Naz Reid in game 2, the Mavericks find a way to get it done and now take that 2-0 series lead in what was a dramatic second half comeback where the Mavericks were down by 12 at halftime, 60-48. They were able to chip away and get themselves back into the game late in the second quarter, and then getting some big minutes from guys like Jaden Hardy, which we'll detail in the course of our show, were able to engage in that comeback. But as we start to look at this game and we went through some of the numbers, and obviously for Luka Doncic having yet another triple-double, his 5th triple-double of the postseason, the 8th of his career, even with the injuries that he's dealing with the ankle and with the knee injury, and you could tell was clearly hobbled at times in game 2, his toughness, his gutsiness, and most importantly, his big-time shot making came up big for the Mavericks to win this game. Look at the first quarter where the Mavericks were down by 6 at the end and won 32-26. The Mavericks shot 50% from 3 and 44% overall from the field. But for the Timberwolves, they were able to get really nice contributions. Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards each had 5 points to begin that first quarter, where they led 21-17 with 5.5 minutes left in that first period. Luka Doncic got off to a good start, having 9 of the Mavericks' first 17 points. But the Timberwolves would outscore the Mavericks 11-9 in the final 5 minutes of that period, as Anthony Edwards had 10 points. And you saw the adjustment that Minnesota made going into game 2 offensively, which was to get downhill attack the paint of the Dallas Mavericks and find a way to get to the free throw line. When you look at what the Timberwolves did in that first quarter specifically, they garnered 14 fouls on the Mavericks, all shooting fouls in the first 4.5 minutes. So you saw what the plan was early. Attack the middle, get downhill, get into the paint, create opportunities to get some easy points at the free throw line. And you saw that continuously, them attacking, and looked much better in terms of the energy and focus that head coach Chris Finch was looking for from him in game number 2, which he didn't see in game number 1. So I thought that was a big difference that you saw early on in the game, was the Timberwolves relentlessly attacking the paint to try and put pressure on the Mavericks defense. And they did so, especially in that first quarter, where, again, they led by 6 at the end of 1. Mavericks started shooting the ball well, shot 50% from the field to start the quarter. Timberwolves were doing just the same as well, but they were able to lead by 6 at the end of 1. Then you go on to the second quarter, where the Timberwolves really started to open things up. They outscored the Mavericks 28-22 in that second quarter, but Naz Reid, who was terrific in this game, especially from the three-point line, and was really the only reason in a lot of ways that the Timberwolves remained in this game because of his consistent three-point shooting. Him and Mike Conley were terrific in that first half as they started a combined 6 of 6 from downtown, eventually going 6 of 7 combined downtown in the first half as Naz Reid crushed them, especially with three-pointers in the corners. The Timberwolves outscored the Mavericks 16-7 in the first 3.5 minutes of that second quarter as the Mavericks went cold, eventually at one point going over 5 minutes without a basket as they found themselves down by 18 at 58-40 with 3.5 minutes left in the first half. And I thought something was key, though, for the Mavericks in that second quarter. They were able to go on a quick 6-0 run to cut the deficit to 12 at 58-46, ultimately be down by 12 at the end of the first half. Luka Doncic ended what was an 8-2 start by the Minnesota Timberwolves by drilling a three-pointer at the top of the key in transition that cut the lead to 40-31 with 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Then Derek Lively, but in that 5-minute field goal drought that we were talking about, with a dunk off of a Luka Doncic assist to cut the lead to 16 at 58-42. But the Mavericks were consistently chipping away as they used that 6-0 run after a couple of Derek Lively dunks and a Luka Doncic layup to give yourself a little bit of confidence that they were able to sustain some offense and some momentum to hopefully try to build on it in the second half, because it was ugly from the shooting standpoint of the Mavericks in that second quarter, where they shot just 1 of 8 from 3 and 7 of 22 overall from the field. And you look at what the Timberwolves are able to do, especially from the three-point line, led by Naz Reid and by, of course, Mike Conley. The Timberwolves shot 8 of 17 from distance, going 47% from 3. The Mavericks were just 29% from 3 and 39% overall from the field. And I mentioned specifically what Mike Conley and Naz Reid did. They combined to go for 24 points. And as I mentioned, based on what they did from the three-point line, they were absolutely sensational, going a combined 6 of 7 from 3 in the first half. So the plan was continue to attack downhill. Mike Conley playing much better than he did in game 1, and the aggressive nature at which the Timberwolves played, that showed throughout the course of the first half, especially in that second quarter. And the Mavericks simply didn't hit enough shots to keep themselves in it early on in that first portion of the second, but were able to sustain a little bit of momentum going into the second half to set up what would be that 18-point comeback. More on this as we detail how the Mavericks were able to clamp down defensively in the second half to really put themselves in position, and Coach Jason Kidd using the Jaden Hardy button and the management of the clock and time and situation, especially down the stretch, that really were some key moments in this game. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us through our spot there, and thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura, as the Mavericks set up a dramatic comeback win, coming back from 18 points down to be able to steal Game 2 on the road against the Minnesota Timberwolves with the 109-108 win, I should say, over the Minnesota Timberwolves, as Luka Doncic's three-pointer with the final seconds of the fourth quarter wins it for Dallas. And as we were detailing some of the adjustments that the Minnesota Timberwolves made, you saw what they were able to do in the first half, especially from the three-point line. Naz Reid and, of course, Mike Conley going a combined 6 of 7 from downtown for 24 points, attacking the rim, getting into the paint, and trying to put pressure on the Mavericks from an attacking standpoint. They even played Kyle Anderson a lot more in dealing with guarding with Kyrie Irving a little bit as well, where he got off to a little bit of a slow start in the game. But again, as we've seen throughout the course of this season, the superstars for the Mavericks showed up, and we talked about this in our preview show going into Game 2 based off of what we saw in Game 1 with the way that Kyrie Irving was able to play well in the first half, scoring 24 of his 30 points in the first half in Game 1, where Luka Doncic was able to close the show, scoring 19 of his 33 points in the second half, with 15 of those coming in the fourth quarter in Game 1. The superstars saving the best for last together in Game number 2 to be able to get the win. And you look at what happened starting in the third quarter. We mentioned how the Mavericks had that 6-0 run late in the second quarter to be able to chip away at it to get it to what was a 12-point deficit going into the second half. The Mavericks would then, in the second half, beginning in that third quarter, they would go on an 18-7 run after they had gotten down by 16 at 68-52 with 9 minutes left in the third to eventually pull it to what was down to a 5-point deficit. They eventually got it to within 2 a couple of times in that third quarter. And I want to focus in on this particular quarter because there were a couple of things that we saw the Mavericks be able to do, and particularly with Jason Kidd, and he continues to push the right buttons at the right time. And it was Jaden Hardy once again, as he did in the third quarter. Daniel Gafford was able to get things started for the Mavericks as he started playing well. He was able to get a dunk at the rim that cut the lead to 14 at 68-54 with just under 9 minutes left in the third. Then Daniel Gafford with the defense on an Anthony Edwards dunk attempt on one end, leading to a transition layup by Luka Doncic on the other end. Defense turning in the offense. Then Derek Lively getting the dunk off of a Luka Doncic assist to cut the deficit to 11. So you're feeling the momentum start to shift in this game with the Mavericks getting some easy buckets at the rim, working the vertical game, but also allowing their defense to turn into offense. And as I mentioned before the commercial break, the defense of the Mavericks locking down in the second half really started to turn things around after they, of course, given up the 60 points in the first half. They only gave up 48 points in the second half to be able to help win this game. Derek Lively continuing to play well. We mentioned combining with Daniel Gafford for 30 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks, all 5 blocks coming from Daniel Gafford. But then Luka Doncic getting into the act, drilling a step-back three-pointer. That cut the lead down to 8. We're now at 6:15 left in the third quarter. And I said on Twitter, I said, look, if you can get this thing within single digits halfway through the third quarter, You're going to give yourself a chance, and let's see where things go from there. Because one thing that we've continued to learn about the Mavericks throughout the course of the season, and you can look at any set of numbers to be able to define what we're talking about here. The Mavericks won 23 games in the clutch. This is one of the best teams in the clutch all season long. The resiliency of which they have shown throughout not just the regular season, but also in the postseason. You think about them getting down 31 to the Los Angeles Clippers in Game 4, ultimately coming back but losing in that game. Time and time again, this team has not given up on games, and they will not quit on games no matter what situation they find themselves in. And that mindset and mentality played itself out again in a hostile environment where the crowd was extremely loud, a really good crowd in Minnesota, but most importantly, the Mavericks sticking together to be able to give themselves an opportunity to win this game, and it was done so with their defense. You look at what they were able to do in that third quarter. We mentioned holding the Timberwolves to 26 points. They were able to get themselves in position to be able to handle business going into the fourth. Jaden Hardy, as I mentioned, played well in that third quarter. You look at what he did from a numbers perspective, went 2 of 2 in the 6 minutes that he played, had 5 points, was a +1, had a knockdown three-pointer that cut the deficit to 2 at 75-73 with 2:26 left in the third. Then Daniel Gafford gets another dunk at the rim, working the pick and roll with Jaden Hardy, which is something he has worked on throughout the course of the regular season. And when you start thinking about the big picture of what the Mavericks have done and the guys that are contributing to this team, whether it be a Derek Lively II, learning how to be a better screener, learning how to play in space on the defensive end, being a shot blocker and a rim protector, being able to provide second chance opportunities with his hustle and his energy in terms of his offensive rebounding. Jaden Hardy showing growth in terms of his ability to be a much better playmaker and decision maker, and doing so in key moments in the postseason, which he has continued to do. And you saw that happen in Game 2, because we know Hardy's not afraid to take jump shots and be able to try to get things going offensively for himself, but it's learning how to play within the game and be able to be a playmaker for himself and for his teammates is where we've seen the continued growth from Jaden Hardy. And I thought his minutes were absolutely huge in game number 2 in that third quarter to help stem the tide for the Mavericks to be able to provide them some stability from some playmaking other than Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Luka was great in that third quarter. He had 11 points as the Mavericks were able to shoot 60% from the field and climb themselves back into the game. But it was their defense in getting them, shutting down the Timberwolves, who shot just 33% from the field and 25% from three. Specifically, when you look at the numbers itself, Timberwolves shot 2 of 8 from downtown and were 7 of 21 from the field overall when what they did in that third quarter there. And yes, I know Naz Reid had hit that three-pointer with 2 seconds left to increase the Timberwolves lead back up to 7 at 86-79. But those moments, those key moments that you got from Jaden Hardy were absolutely huge. And the Mavericks getting the vertical game going once again, but their defense locking down really set themselves up in position going into what will be a dramatic fourth quarter for Dallas. And for them, this is where the Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic show showed up once again. Because, again, we've seen it throughout the course of the season. Kyrie Irving being the fourth quarter closer. And Luka Doncic, we know, has a flair for the dramatic, especially when it comes to cooking Rudy Gobert. You can go back to the series a couple of years ago in Utah where Luka Doncic put Rudy Gobert on the dance floor and cooked him there. You can go back to Eurobasket when he dropped over 45 points on France in Eurobasket in 2022, cooking Rudy Gobert on the three-point line. I say all that to set up what we eventually saw with 3 seconds left in the game. But before we got there, Mavericks down by 7 to start the fourth quarter. Again, you have felt like the momentum had shifted from Minnesota to Dallas going into that fourth and final frame, and the Mavericks seized on that momentum that they had built up in that third quarter. They take an 87-86 lead, starting with an 8-0 run. Kyrie Irving getting cooking in that fourth quarter. 6 of the first 8 points on a couple of three-pointers in the first minute and a half of the fourth quarter. And from there, it was game on, because the Mavericks had already engaged in what was an uphill climb for them to be able to get into position to be able to have an opportunity to win this game, and they had finally completed that comeback by taking what was a 1-point lead just a minute and a half into the period, as the Mavericks would outscore the Timberwolves 13-8 in the first 5.5 minutes. But the Timberwolves were able to maintain what was a 2-point lead at 94-92 with 6.5 minutes left in the game. Again, thanks to Naz Reid and his three-point shooting, where you look at the game, what he was able to finish at. Naz Reid was great from the three-point line. He's always had big games against the Mavericks. He went 7 of 9 from downtown with the 23 points that he had, 8 of 13 overall in 31 minutes that he played for Minnesota. But when you look at the back and forth fourth quarter between the Mavs and the Timberwolves, the Mavs led 97-96 after a Kyrie Irving free throw with 5:17 left in the period. The Timberwolves would respond with a quick 6-2 run of their own to take what was a 102-99 lead with 3:44 left in the game. Back and forth, you could start to feel the desperation coming from the Minnesota Timberwolves and what they were trying to do to ensure that they got out of game 2 with the series tied at 1 game apiece, because they know what history tells them in terms of being down 2-0. It's very difficult to win a series, especially when the road team is the one that wins the first 2 games of a series. But then the Mavericks continually showing that resiliency. They bounce back. They would take a 103-102 lead with less than 3 minutes left in the game, based off of what they were doing after a quick 4-0 burst, after a Derek Lively dunk. So as you start to look at the moments, 87-86 when Kyrie Irving was able to get in the lead. PJ Washington, again, defense leading to offense. He got a steal that led to a Kyrie Irving basket from his three-pointer, his third three-pointer of the fourth quarter at the top of the key, gave the Mavericks a 90-89 lead with 8:14 left in the fourth quarter. Again, the back-and-forth nature of this game. Luka Doncic, not only the scoring, but the passing as well. He got his 10th assist of the game with a pass to Daniel Gafford for a layup to tie the game at 94. Then on the very next possession, Daniel Gafford's block. We mentioned the 5 blocks that he had in the game. Had a block shot on a Mike Conley three-pointer. And then on the other end, Luka Doncic then getting the ball to Gafford, who somehow hit this incredible one-handed shot off the backboard to be able to give the Mavericks a 96-94 lead with just under 6 minutes left to go in the game. And again, the back and forth resiliency of the Mavericks continued to show up time and time again in this game. And you look at what happened after that. Obviously, the Timberwolves would score the next 6 points to be able to lead at what was 108-103. In the middle of that, the Mavericks had a chance to cut the lead to what would be 1, but Kyrie Irving missed a pair of free throws, which he rarely does. This came with a minute 44 left as he missed 2 free throws that would have pulled the Mavericks within 1 at 106-105. But I want to go back to the 5.5 minute mark of the fourth quarter, because this is one thing that has become a real weapon for the Dallas Mavericks and their ability to challenge calls and to garner extra possessions. You look at what happened at the 5:31 mark of the fourth quarter. There was an offensive foul that was called on Derrick Jones Jr. The Mavericks were able to win that challenge to be able to steal a possession there, and you saw them be able to take advantage of it based off of what they were able to do. Again, finding ways to create extra possessions for yourself, and the Mavericks being able to put themselves in position to win a game. Because, again, if you're going to utilize these challenges, they didn't use them in the first half. They were judicious with their ability to use their challenge, and it came up big because they had another one to use that we'll get to here in just a moment. But, again, a real pivotal moment where Kyrie Irving missed those 2 free throws that would have pulled him to within 1 at 106-105 with a minute 44 left. But Kyrie Irving would definitely make up for it late in the fourth quarter as the Mavericks were able to utilize the final minute and 30 seconds with a couple of dramatic three-pointers. Obviously, Kyrie Irving, he was able to hit a 3 to pull the Mavericks within 2 at 108-106. That came with a minute 5 left in the fourth quarter. And the second challenge that the Mavericks used and won was when Kyrie Irving caused a deflection on Jaden McDaniels. Initially, it was ruled Minnesota ball because of what either Kyrie or Luka had touched it. It was ultimately ruled that McDaniels was the last one to touch the ball. That gave the ball back to the Dallas Mavericks to be able to have another possession. Again, utilizing the challenge as a weapon, something that they've been tremendous at all season long. Those 2 moments in the game, I thought, just showed you how tremendously well Jason Kidd and his staff managed the game, how they were able to score, understand time, score, and situation, and use that to their advantage. And then ultimately having the right opportunities to be able to utilize those challenges and win them. Those were 2 things that may not necessarily go and be seen in a box score, but when you look at the margin of error and how games are won and lost in the NBA playoffs, those are the kinds of things that you're looking at in terms of the differences in winning and losing games. And for the Mavericks, that was huge for them to be able to get those challenges won to move forward from there. But obviously for the Mavericks, with a minute left, Kyrie Irving hits the 3 to pull them within 2 at 108-106. Then we have the challenge that was won by the Mavericks with 47 seconds left. And then, of course, Luka Doncic on the next possession missed a jumper that would have tied it at 108. But then Anthony Edwards turned the ball over with 12 seconds left, trying to get it to Naz Reid, who was out there on the 3-point line. As he was darting to the right, Anthony Edwards threw it behind him to the left, and the ball ultimately went out of bounds. Some inexperience in that moment where, for the most part in the game, Anthony Edwards was making good decisions to be able to help his team be in position to win the game. But a critical error in that moment led to, of course, what set up Luka Doncic getting the screen, Derek Lively setting up the screen to get the switch for Rudy Gobert to come out on the 3-point line, and Luka Doncic drains his patented step-back 3-pointer to be able to win the game. Naz Reid would miss a final attempt at the buzzer. It fell to the wayside as the Mavericks found a way to get the 109-108 win. But it was classic Luka Doncic stepping up in that moment to be able to hit the game winner to send the Mavericks to a 2-0 series lead. Luka Doncic talking about what the plan was, or lack thereof, based on that moment and what he was able to do to create the space to get it over Rudy Gobert. Take a listen.
Jason said that there was no plan necessarily to go for a 2 or 3 during that. When do you make a decision that I'm going to go for the step back? Was it when you got the switch on Rudy? Was it just all instinct?
I don't really know. I can't answer that. I just saw some space, decided to shoot a 3. Get to my spot, step back. That's it. But I just decided, I saw some space.
So Luka Doncic finding the space to be able to do it, and he was able to drain it over Rudy Gobert. And again, the trust and the belief that Jason Kidd has in his superstars and Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving continues to put this team in a fantastic spot to make the plays in the end. Because no matter what, whether it was Luka Doncic hitting the 3, Jason Kidd, as you will hear right here, trusted his superstar to make the right play in the right moment, and he was able to do so. Take a listen.
Jason, just going into that last play, was the plan to go for the win and not even to play for overtime, or was the plan just to get the best shot available?
Now you got to ask Luka that. The play was to get Luka the ball and let Luka do what Luka does in those moments. And that's, if he has trust with his teammates, if they were going to come and hit him, he knew who he was going to find to knock down a shot. We talked about taking a 2. We're only down 2. But when he got to dancing with Gobert, you could see that the step back was coming, and the rest was history.
So as you hear from Jason Kidd, he knew what the plan was going to be, or just allowing Luka to create the plan on his own to be able to win it at the end. And for the Mavericks now, taking a huge 2-0 series lead, you saw the good things that they would did, because both teams went 12 of 31 from the 3-point line. Both shot 38% from the field. The Mavericks in game 2 were 48 of 84 from the field for 48%. The Timberwolves were just 41%. And I'm sure they felt like that they beat themselves with some turnovers and some missed shots that they had, but you give the Mavericks credit for taking this game, not only with obviously the dramatic 3-point shot that Luka Doncic hit to win it, but the Mavericks out-rebounded the Minnesota Timberwolves for a second straight game to begin this series, as they out-rebounded them by 4, 44-40, and that was not something that you may have thought coming into the series would actually happen, but you give credit to the Mavericks centers and Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, who have continued to be stellar as a tandem together. You saw what they were able to do, combining for 30 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks in the game. Their defense, their shot blocking, their rim protection, their activity on the glass really was big for the Mavericks in game 2. And your stars stepped up to give you exactly what you needed in that fourth quarter. When you look at what Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving did in the fourth quarter, helping the Mavericks score the 30 points, they combined to score 18 of the 30 points in that final period, with Kyrie Irving scoring 13, 4 3-pointers that he knocked down, going 4 of 5 from downtown, allowing the game to come to him. Like he took over in game 1 in the first half, he took over in the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter in game 2 to set up his superstar teammate in Luka Doncic to deliver the finish over Rudy Gobert, who continues to get terrorized by Luka Doncic over and over and over again. The playoffs a couple of years ago against Utah, Eurobasket a couple of years ago where Luka Doncic was putting him all over SportsCenter in terms of the highlight reel there. And then once again, Luka Doncic letting the crowd know, letting Rudy Gobert know, you can't guard me, mother bleeper. And guess what? He was able to put a dagger in the Timberwolves' heart in game number 2. What more can you say about Luka Doncic? His 5th triple-double of this postseason, the 8th of his career, another 30-point massive triple-double, and the game winner for the Mavericks. Now they come home for game number 3 on Sunday with a huge 2-0 series lead, and they continue to play with the sense of desperation that you thought that the Timberwolves will play with, that I thought they did play with much better with in game 2, but it simply was not enough as they made the critical mistakes down the stretch. And good teams, great teams, championship-like teams take advantage of those mistakes, and the Mavericks did it once again, now giving themselves an opportunity to take a commanding 3-0 lead when they take on Minnesota in game 3. We'll have much more coverage throughout the course of the weekend, but the Mavericks find a way, a huge comeback, being down by 18. They didn't give up. They didn't quit. And more than anything, yes, their defense was stellar in the second half. They got some timely shot making from their superstars and Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. They got really good help off the bench from Jaden Hardy, and their centers were great down the stretch in terms of their defense and their rebounding and everything that we've already talked about. But this was another team win with guts, heart, and effort that you simply cannot teach. And most importantly, this team has it, and making believers out of a lot of folks, led by Luka Doncic, who simply put his stamp on his game once again with his incredible 3-point step back shot over Rudy Gobert to win the game by 1. And now the Mavericks are in the driver's seat to have an opportunity to take a huge, massive 3-0 series lead to put themselves within 1 game of, yes, boys and girls, making the NBA Finals this season. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Remember, I'm your Mavericks Pre and Postgame host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network on 97.1 The Eagle. We will have the pregame show for game number 3 on Sunday evening, with that game tipping off at 7 p.m. That'll be at 6:30 in terms of my pregame show. But you can catch the Inside the Mavs podcast all weekend long. I'll be having coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. When the Mavericks get back on the practice court, we'll have shoot-arounds. I will be there, front and center there, to provide you all the coverage that you're looking for when it comes to your Dallas Mavericks, as we will continue to bring you the best Mavericks coverage here on Inside the Mavs. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, like and comment on the video as well. Let me know how you're feeling. Follow me at Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube and download the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Again, my name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Postgame host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.